right, welcome back. Stephen Moore, author of Free Fall, God's Path to Courage and Boldness. We're just continuing along the book and just giving you little brief sessions on what the book covers in greater detail. If you want more detail, and like I've said before, you're probably going to have to work through this path several times. It's not just a one and done, but this spiritual growth in the area of courage is well worth the effort. Anyway, this section, I call it Give It a Name, Give It a Place, and it kind of comes from a very painful thing that happened to me. Is that in doing this little counseling gig that I do, I had a friend who had been through alcohol and drug rehab, and he started helping other people in this area. And just amazing guy. And I started working with him. I would counsel his guys going through rehab and teach classes on things like relationships, sex, finances, whatever he needed me to do. But he was just so inspirational. And then at some point, I kind of lost track of him, and I didn't realize it, but something had happened in his life. And he contacted me after maybe a year or so and said, "Hey, I really need some help." And so we started meeting together and just been through some really tough personal times. And he thought that everyone at our church knew about it, so he switched churches, and he was just very embarrassed. So we started working together and working through some of the problems that he had been in. And then we both got busy. And we stopped meeting, and I just kept saying, "Oh yeah, I need to call him. And then I kind of didn't. And then one night I was writing, which is something I enjoyed doing, and he just crossed my heart. I had this strong impression of him, and I needed to call him. But I said to myself, let me finish what I'm doing. And so I kept writing, and then it was, well, it's late. I'll call him tomorrow. And then got into the next day, well, he's probably at work now. And then by 2 mornings after I'd first had that impression I needed to call him, he had taken his own life. What was that in my heart? Well, honestly, what I didn't recognize is it was fear. And my fear was just because it was a fear of being exposed. I had let my friend down. I felt embarrassed that I hadn't reached out to him sooner, that I hadn't kept my attention where it should have been and helping him work through these problems And so I was afraid to call because I was embarrassed. I didn't want to have to explain myself. Of course, the real question is, when would have been a good time? It's very important that we give our fear a name, because sometimes our fear masquerades as something else. To me, it masquerades as delay. Something that I'm actually afraid of doing. I'll say, I just don't want to do it right now. Hesitation. Choosing something else. I've got to get this done first, then I'll do it. In other words, give your fear a name. Recognize what your fear modes are. My most common one, once again, is just delay. It's not, I'm not going to do this. It's just, I'll do it later. I've got a better time for this. Figure out what your fear modes are and just call them what they are. It is very important also that as we do this, that we identify what it is we're afraid of. If we feel God leading us to go and talk to someone, but then we just find ourselves being very, very afraid, what are we afraid of? Are we afraid of rejection? Are we afraid of looking stupid? I know for me, growing up, I experienced a lot of rejection. And so that's one of the big things I just have to realize, is that whenever I find myself being hesitant to approach people or to do something that God has asked me to do, I just need to call it what it is. It's a fear of rejection, and I need to move on past that. The next question I need to ask is, when I figure out what it is I'm afraid of, is God too big to handle this? Well, if you put it that way, that's kind of a stupid question, isn't it? Of course he's not. The problem's not too big for him to handle. So it's really important to just identify that. Getting it a place, is that these are just very natural human tendencies, is that we do have certain fears. We are dealing with a God that we cannot touch and see like we can each other. And so it's very natural that we just want to put things off, but just give it a place. Hey, that's, I recognize that I tend to delay when I'm fearful. I recognize that I fear rejection. And so when I'm having to approach people, that may be one of the reasons. Hey, one of the biggest things we can do is just call fear what it is. And also, one more thing. There's a great quote by former President Ronald Reagan that I just love that really helps me out. And that is, don't be afraid to see what you see. If you see a problem with you or with someone you love, If you see God putting something out there in front of you and calling your attention to it, just looks like, don't be afraid to look at it. Just call it for what it is. God is big enough to handle any problem that we have. Let's kick fear to the curb and let's just do this. See you next time.